The first time Aaliyah Jackson met Lee Sang-hoon, she didn't even know his name. The Grand Hansong Hotel glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Politicians laughed beside celebrities. CEOs toasted billion-dollar deals while cameras flashed across the ballroom. To Aaliyah, none of it mattered. She was there to work. Balancing a silver tray, she slipped quietly between guests, careful not to interrupt conversations worth more than everything she'd ever owned. This catering shift would cover half her rent if nothing went wrong. "Table 12 needs champagne," another server whispered. "I've got it." As she crossed the ballroom, she noticed a young waitress frozen beside a serving station, struggling beneath a tower of crystal glasses. Guests brushed past without a glance. One wrong step, everything would shatter. Aaliyah immediately changed direction. "Here." She took half the glasses. "We'll carry them together." Relief washed over the young woman's face. "I thought I was going to drop them." "We've all had our first impossible day." After safely delivering the glasses, the waitress smiled gratefully. "I owe you." "You don't." Aaliyah squeezed her shoulder. "Just help the next person when it's your turn." She walked away. Neither woman noticed the man watching from across the ballroom. Lee Sang-hoon had attended enough galas to know exactly how people behaved around power. They straightened their posture, measured every word, watched his reactions. Tonight, one woman hadn't even looked at him. Instead, she'd noticed someone everyone else ignored. "Who is she?" he asked quietly. Secretary Park followed his gaze. "A catering employee." "Find out her name." "I'll have security bring her?" "No." His answer came immediately. "Just observe." Later that evening, Aaliyah approached a table carrying fresh coffee. 3 executives stopped her. "Where are you from?" "Nigeria." One smiled thinly. "You speak Korean well." "Thank you. But you'll never really belong here." Nearby guests pretended not to hear. Aaliyah maintained her professional smile. "Would anyone like more coffee?" Instead of answering, the executive shoved his empty cup carelessly across the table. Coffee spilled over the white cloth. "And perhaps be more careful." She knew exactly what he'd done. So did he. "I'm sorry about the tablecloth." She reached for a napkin. Another hand reached it first. "I believe—" A calm voice interrupted. "The tablecloth owes her an apology." The room fell silent. Lee Sang-hoon stepped forward. No anger, no raised voice, just complete control. The executives immediately stood. "Chairman Lee." He ignored them. Handing Aaliyah a clean napkin, he asked, "Were you injured?" She blinked. "No." "Good." Only then did he look at the executive. "My understanding is that adults clean up the messes they create. It was an accident." "I agree." His expression never changed. "So you won't mind cleaning it?" After an uncomfortable silence, the executive quietly wiped the table himself. As Sang-hoon turned to leave, Aaliyah called after him. "Thank you." He paused only long enough to reply, "Everyone deserves respect." Then he disappeared into the crowd. Later that night, the young waitress rushed into the staff room. "Do you know who that was?" "The gentleman from before?" "That was Lee Sang-hoon." Aaliyah frowned. "The billionaire?" "The future chairman of Lee Group." She stared in disbelief. "He doesn't seem like someone everyone fears." The waitress laughed. "They say he smiles twice a year." "I've already seen him smile once." "Then you're ahead of most of Korea." Neither realized that elsewhere in Seoul. Someone else was discussing Aaliyah. Secretary Park placed a file on Sang-hoon's desk. "Aaliyah Jackson, 29, master's degree in organizational psychology. Graduated with distinction, freelance consultant, international scholarship recipient, no criminal record, no political affiliations." Park looked up. "You've never investigated anyone this carefully." Sang-hoon closed the file. "Tonight, over 100 people tried to impress me." "Yes." "How many noticed the frightened waitress?" "1." He looked across the city skyline. "Keep watching. No contact. I want to know whether kindness is who she is. Or who she was tonight." 3 days later, rain tapped against the cafe windows as Aaliyah worked on a consulting proposal she desperately hoped would pay next month's rent. Secretary Park approached her table. "My employer has reviewed your work." He slid a folder toward her. Inside was a consulting contract worth more money than she'd earned in years. Then she noticed the final page. A recommendation had already been written. She only needed to sign it, without conducting the evaluation herself. She looked up. This report hasn't been completed. Our client considers it a formality. I can't sign this. The payment can be increased. It isn't about the money. No one will know. I'll know. Park studied her. No hesitation. No negotiation. My answer is honesty. He nodded respectfully before leaving. Across the street, inside a black sedan, Secretary Park climbed back into the passenger seat. She refused. Immediately? Without hesitation. A faint smile crossed Sang-hoon's face. My family has spent years learning how to buy people. He looked through the rain-covered glass toward Aaliyah. I need someone they can't. For a brief moment, their eyes met through the cafe window. Neither smiled, neither waved, but something had already begun. The following afternoon, after another unsuccessful client meeting, Aaliyah crossed the plaza outside Lee Group headquarters. A loud crash stopped her. An elderly janitor had dropped his cleaning cart, supplies scattered everywhere. A young executive shoved him. You should know your place. The old man's cracked glasses slid across the pavement. People watched. No one moved. Aaliyah did. She knelt beside the janitor. Are you hurt? I'm fine. No. She handed him his broken glasses. You're embarrassed. Then she turned toward the executive. You pushed him. He blocked my way, so you pushed him. He should know his place. And what place is that? The executive frowned. You don't work here. No. Then stay out of it. She stepped closer. I already have. The crowd slowed to watch. If nobody speaks when something is wrong, people like you start believing you're right. The executive, suddenly aware of the attention, muttered under his breath and walked away. The old janitor smiled. You shouldn't have done that. I know. You've made an old man feel less invisible. She helped gather his supplies before leaving. She never noticed the security cameras, or the private elevator the old man entered moments later. Inside, the janitor removed his cap, then his glasses. Secretary Park smiled. I assume observation 3 is complete. Lee Sang-hoon nodded. Yes, you've decided. For the first time in years. The next morning, Secretary Park knocked on Aaliyah's apartment door. My employer would like to meet you. Half an hour later, the elevator carried her to the top floor of Lee Group Tower. She stepped into a quiet office overlooking all of Seoul. A familiar voice greeted her. You came. Lee Sang-hoon turned from the window. The hotel. The janitor. She stared. That was you. Yes. You lied. I observed. She crossed her arms. So everything was a test. The situations were real. The choices were yours. She searched his face. Why? He placed a folder before her. Corporate bylaws, board resolutions, legal documents. None of it made sense. Until he explained. The Lee Group votes for its next chairman in 40 days. She listened quietly. Our bylaws require the incoming chairman to have a legally recognized immediate family. A wife. Yes. So marry someone. My uncle has spent 10 years arranging exactly that. If I marry one family's daughter, every other family becomes my enemy. If I reject them all, they unite against me. Aaliyah slowly looked up. So you're trapped. Exactly. He met her eyes. I want you to become my wife. Silence filled the room. You've spoken to me 4 times. I know. This is insane. It is. I'm barely paying rent. Yes. Your family will hate me. They almost certainly will. My life will never be the same. It won't. She laughed in disbelief. And you expect me to say yes? No. His answer surprised her. I expect you to say no. She frowned. Anyone willing to marry me after one conversation is exactly the wrong person. For the first time, she saw the exhaustion beneath his calm expression. Then he quietly added, if you leave, my uncle becomes chairman. And he'll dismantle the International Scholarship Foundation. Her hand tightened around the documents. The scholarship that brought you to Korea. She froze. Without that scholarship, she would never have built the life she had, never earned her degree, never stood in this office. She looked back at him. You planned this conversation carefully. I tried to avoid having it. Why? Because the moment I asked, your peaceful life ended. Aaliyah stood silently, staring at the man in front of her. She had walked into the building expecting another consulting offer. Instead, she'd been asked to become the fake wife of Korea's most powerful billionaire. And for the first time, she understood why he'd chosen her. Aaliyah barely slept. Every argument told her to walk away. Fake marriages belonged in television dramas, not real life. Lee Sang-hoon was asking her to stand beside one of the richest men in Asia while his powerful family tried to destroy both of them. It was madness. Yet, one thought refused to leave her. Without the scholarship that had brought her to Korea, her life would have been completely different. If Sang-hoon lost, hundreds of students would lose the same opportunity she'd been given. That burden stayed with her. The following evening, she returned to Lee Group Tower. Sang-hoon looked almost surprised to see her. I thought you'd decided. I haven't. She sat across from him. I have questions. You deserve answers. For this marriage, how long? Until the restructuring vote. And afterward? If you wish to leave, I'll never stop you. You mean that? I do. She studied him carefully. What exactly would you expect from me? We appear together. We attend family events. We convince the public our marriage is genuine. No deception beyond the marriage itself? No. You'll have your own finances, your own career, your own decisions. No restrictions. She narrowed her eyes. You're offering me freedom inside a fake marriage. I'm offering you respect. Silence stretched between them. Finally, she asked, and if I say no? I'll accept it. No pressure, no bargaining, no threats, just quiet honesty. For reasons she couldn't explain, that made the decision even harder. 3 days later, Secretary Park received a single phone call. I'll do it. Park smiled for the first time all week. I'll inform Chairman Lee. When Sang-hoon heard the news, he simply nodded. Prepare everything. Even Park looked surprised. That's all? What else should I say? You've just solved the biggest problem of your life. Sang-hoon looked toward the window. No. I've just created a much larger one. The wedding took place quietly. No television cameras, no celebrity guests, only lawyers, 2 witnesses, a government official. Aaliyah wore a simple ivory dress. Sang-hoon wore a black suit. The ceremony lasted less than 15 minutes. When they exchanged rings, neither smiled very much. Both understood this wasn't the beginning of a romance. It was the beginning of a war. The announcement exploded across Korea before sunset. Lee Group Ear marries mystery African woman who is Aaliyah Jackson. Chairman shocks. Business World news channels interrupted regular programming. Social media erupted. Some congratulated them. Most questioned everything. Within hours, the Lee family gathered. The atmosphere inside the Lee estate was colder than winter. Sang-hoon's uncle sat perfectly still, reading the announcement for a second time. Across from him sat his daughter, Sang-hoon's former fiancé. She hadn't spoken since seeing the headlines. Finally, the uncle folded the newspaper. So, he chose a stranger. His daughter looked up. You promised he'd marry me. I promised he wouldn't have another choice. The grandmother entered the room. Everyone stood. She looked at the newspaper. An African woman. Nobody answered. She looked directly at Sang-hoon's uncle. You spent 10 years arranging this marriage. I did. And yet, she placed the newspaper on the table. You lost. His jaw tightened. This isn't over. No, she agreed quietly. It has only begun. That evening, Sang-hoon brought Aaliyah to the family estate. This is where they decide whether to tolerate me? No. He adjusted his cufflinks. This is where they decide how to destroy us. She laughed nervously. I appreciate the honesty. I promised I wouldn't lie to you. The enormous dining room fell silent when they entered. Every eye turned toward Aaliyah, some curious, some openly hostile. The grandmother spoke first. So, you are the woman. Aaliyah bowed respectfully. It's an honor to meet you. The older woman studied her for several uncomfortable seconds. You understand this family doesn't approve. I assumed as much. You still came. I married your grandson. I didn't marry your approval. For the first time, the grandmother's expression shifted. Not acceptance. Interest. Dinner became an interrogation. Where is your family? America. What does your father do? He passed away. Can you manage the responsibilities of this family? I've managed every responsibility life has already given me. One cousin smirked. Korean society isn't easy for outsiders. No, Aaliyah answered calmly. It isn't. The cousin waited for more. There wasn't any. Every attempt to embarrass her met the same quiet confidence. She refused to become defensive. That frustrated them more than anger would have. Only one person openly attacked, Sang-hoon's former fiancé. So, she smiled sweetly. How much are they paying you? The room became silent. Aaliyah calmly placed down her chopsticks. Nothing. You expect us to believe that? I don't need you to. You married a billionaire. I married a man. The former fiancé laughed. Don't pretend you're in love. Aaliyah met her eyes. I never said I was. That answer surprised everyone, even Sang-hoon. I'm simply honoring the commitment I made. No drama, no excuses, just truth. After dinner, the grandmother asked to speak with Sang-hoon alone. You've embarrassed this family. I've protected it. You brought a stranger into our bloodline. I brought someone your family can't buy. The older woman's eyes narrowed. You trust her already? No. He answered honestly. I'm learning to. The grandmother studied him carefully. She hadn't expected that answer. The attacks began almost immediately. Photographers followed Aaliyah everywhere. Reporters camped outside their residence. Anonymous accounts spread rumors. She had married for money. She had manipulated Sang-hoon. She had planned everything from the beginning. One headline even questioned whether she had forged her academic records. None of it was true, but truth moved much slower than gossip. One morning, Aaliyah stared silently at dozens of hateful comments online. You shouldn't read them. Sang-hoon placed breakfast beside her. I was curious. And I regret being curious. He almost smiled. I've regretted reading comments for 15 years. She laughed despite herself. Their first genuine laugh together. It surprised both of them. Living together proved awkward. They occupied opposite ends of a home larger than her entire apartment building. At breakfast, they discussed schedules. At dinner, corporate strategy, nothing personal. Until one evening, she noticed him still working after midnight. You've been here since breakfast. I know. When was the last time you slept properly? He looked genuinely unsure. I don't remember. She quietly disappeared into the kitchen. A few minutes later, she returned with coffee. You'll still need sleep. I know. But until then, she placed the mug beside him. Coffee. He looked at her, then at the cup. Thank you. It was such a small moment, yet somehow it felt important. Days became weeks. Without realizing it, they settled into routines. She reminded him to eat. He quietly arranged transportation whenever she had meetings. She challenged ideas nobody else dared question. He actually listened. One evening, during a strategy meeting, a senior executive dismissed a junior assistant's suggestion. Aaliyah interrupted. I think she's right. The room fell silent. Sang-hoon looked toward the assistant. Explain your idea. 10 minutes later. It solved the problem they'd spent hours debating. After the meeting, he asked, How did you know? Because nobody else was listening. He smiled faintly. I've noticed that's something you do. At another company event, a reporter cornered Aaliyah. Is this marriage simply a business arrangement? Before she could answer, Sang-hoon stepped beside her. My wife doesn't owe strangers explanations about her personal life. He guided her away without another word. Later that night, she thanked him. I was handling it. I know. Then why intervene? He looked at her quietly. Because you're my responsibility. She frowned. I don't need rescuing. I wasn't rescuing you. I was standing beside you. For reasons she couldn't explain. Those words stayed with her. Gradually. The performance became easier, not because they were becoming better actors, because they no longer needed to pretend they respected one another. That part had become real. Secretary Park noticed it before either of them did. They're changing. Another executive nodded. They're beginning to trust each other. Park smiled quietly. That's considerably more dangerous. Dangerous? For everyone trying to separate them. Meanwhile, inside another office, Sang-hoon's uncle watched the news coverage. They're surviving. His daughter folded her arms. So we stop attacking the marriage. He looked toward the city and start attacking the people inside it. A slow smile spread across his face. They've won the first battle. They won't win the next. The attacks changed. The family stopped targeting the marriage. They started targeting trust. One afternoon, Secretary Park walked into Sang-hoon's office carrying several files. During the meeting, he casually mentioned, "The background investigation was extremely thorough." Aaliyah looked up. "What investigation?" Silence. Park realized his mistake too late. The room suddenly felt smaller. She slowly turned toward Sang-hoon. "What investigation?" He closed the file. "I was going to tell you." "When?" No answer. She understood before he spoke. "You investigated me?" "Yes." "Before we met?" Yes." "Everything?" "My team reviewed your education, employment, financial history, family." Every word landed harder than the last. "So none of it was chance?" "The hotel. I knew who you were." "The cafe?" "Yes." "The contract?" "Yes." "The janitor?" "Yes." She stared at him. For the first time since their wedding, she couldn't recognize the man standing in front of her. "I thought you chose to trust me." "I wanted to." "You didn't." She stepped back. "You collected evidence." "Aaliyah, were you ever meeting me? Or only confirming what you already believed?" He had no answer that could undo the truth. She left. For 3 days, they barely spoke. The house felt enormous again. Meals became silent. Hallways became empty. Even Secretary Park avoided both of them. Finally, Sang-hoon knocked on her study door. "Can we talk?" She nodded once. "I won't defend what I did." He sat opposite her. "My entire life. Everyone wanted something from me. My father negotiated relationships. My uncle treated marriage like a business merger. I stopped believing people. So you investigated me. I investigated everyone. But you became different." She remained silent. "I watched you help strangers. I watched you refuse money. I watched you defend someone you believed had nothing to offer. I kept investigating because..." He looked down. "I didn't know how to trust anymore." She answered quietly. "That's the saddest thing you've ever told me." "It isn't an excuse." "I know." It was fear. Neither spoke for a long moment. Finally, she asked, "If we survive this, will there be any more secrets?" "No." "No more tests? No more investigations?" "No." She studied him, then nodded slowly. "I can't forgive you overnight." "I don't expect you to." "But..." She managed the faintest smile. "It's a beginning." For the first time in days, he breathed normally again. Their enemies noticed the distance immediately. Sang-hoon's uncle smiled. "Good. Keep pushing." The next attacks came all at once. Anonymous articles accused Aaliyah of marrying for money. Edited financial documents appeared online. Television commentators questioned whether the marriage itself was legal. Sang-hoon's former fiancé gave emotional interviews describing how she'd been replaced by a stranger. Public opinion began shifting. Investors grew nervous. Then came the family's strongest move, a legal challenge. If they convinced the board the marriage had never been genuine, Sang-hoon could lose the chairmanship before the vote even happened. The board requested testimony. Executives filled the room. Directors watched silently. Lawyers waited. Aaliyah stood alone before them. One director spoke first. "Mrs. Lee, was this marriage entered into in good faith?" She took a slow breath. It began as an agreement. Several board members exchanged satisfied looks. Then she continued. "But agreements become commitments. And commitments reveal character. You've questioned my motives? So let me ask you something." She looked around the room. "If Chairman Lee had married someone chosen by his uncle, would any of you be asking this question?" Silence. "I wasn't selected because I was powerful. I was selected because I couldn't be bought. You already know that's true. Otherwise..." She looked directly at several directors. none of you would still be trying. No one interrupted. She continued calmly. Your concern isn't whether this marriage is real. Your concern is whether it disrupted someone else's plan. The room remained silent. I didn't marry Lee Sang-hoon because he was rich. I married him because I believed protecting something larger than ourselves mattered. If that makes me unqualified, then perhaps you're choosing the wrong chairman. She stepped away from the podium. No applause, no dramatic reactions, just thoughtful silence. It was enough. Days later, the legal challenge was quietly withdrawn. The uncle realized subtlety had failed. He requested a private meeting. Present were the grandmother, his daughter, the former fiancé, their attorneys, and Aaliyah. A thick folder rested on the table. Inside, a financial settlement worth more money than Aaliyah had ever imagined. You leave the marriage quietly. The uncle smiled politely. No scandal. No divorce battle. You simply walk away. Everyone watched her. Waiting, she slowly removed her wedding ring, placed it on the table. The uncle smiled. He thought he'd won. Instead, Aaliyah slid the ring across the table. Not toward him, toward Sang-hoon. The room fell silent. Without hesitation, he picked it up, took her hand, placed the ring back on her finger, then looked directly at his family. This ring stopped belonging to this family. The day she became my family. Nobody spoke. Even the uncle's smile disappeared. Finally, the grandmother stood. Enough. Her voice carried through the room. This meeting is over. For the first time, she wasn't protecting tradition. She was protecting them. The final weeks passed quietly. The smear campaign slowed. Board members began distancing themselves from the uncle. Executives who had remained neutral quietly pledged support to Sang-hoon. Something unexpected had happened. People weren't changing sides because of speeches. They were changing sides because they'd watched Aaliyah for months. Her consistency had become impossible to ignore. Kindness, integrity, calm under pressure. Those qualities had quietly defeated years of political strategy. Voting day arrived. The boardroom filled before sunrise. Outside, reporters crowded every entrance. Inside, the votes were counted, then counted again. Finally, the chairman of the board stood. The motion passes. Lee Sang-hoon is confirmed as chairman of Lee Group. Applause filled the room. Across the table, the uncle closed his folder. 10 years of planning had ended in defeat, not because someone outspent him or outmaneuvered him, but because he had underestimated something he couldn't measure. Character. Later that afternoon, Sang-hoon and Aaliyah stood together before dozens of cameras. Questions flew from every direction. One reporter finally asked what everyone wanted to know. Chairman Lee, was your marriage always fake? The room fell silent. Sang-hoon looked toward Aaliyah. She looked back. Neither needed to rehearse the answer. He smiled. A real one. Small, but unmistakable. It began as a strategy. He paused, long enough for every camera to capture the moment. It became my life. The reporters erupted with more questions. Neither of them answered. They didn't need to. The truth had already been spoken. Months later, the Scholarship Foundation remained open. Hundreds of students continued receiving opportunities that might otherwise have disappeared. One afternoon, Aaliyah quietly established a scholarship of her own. She never announced it publicly. She simply remembered what one chance had done for her life and decided someone else deserved theirs. One evening, long after the headlines had faded, she found Sang-hoon standing beside the living room window overlooking Seoul. The city's quieter tonight. He smiled. No, we're just finally hearing it. She stood beside him. Neither hurried to speak. After a while, he asked softly if I hadn't needed a fake wife. Do you think we would have met anyway? She thought about the frightened waitress, the spilled coffee, the fake janitor, the impossible proposal, then smiled. I think kind people usually find each other eventually. He laughed quietly. For a man who had once been famous for never smiling, it had become surprisingly easy. Outside, the lights of Seoul stretched endlessly into the night. Inside, what had begun as a contract, a strategy, a calculated risk, had become exactly what neither of them had been searching for. A home. As the lights of Seoul faded into the night, one thing became clear. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with destiny. They begin with a choice to trust, a choice to stay, a choice to stand beside someone when the entire world tells you to walk away. If Aaliyah's journey touched your heart, let me know in the comments. At what moment did you realize their fake marriage had become something real? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next unforgettable Afro-Korean drama. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Until our next story, take care of yourself, keep believing in kindness, and remember, sometimes the people who change our lives forever are the ones we never expected to meet. I'll see you in the next story.